all the members who are attending here. Trust all of you are safe and your near and dear ones are healthy. In fact, given the kind of pandemic situation we have, it is very disturbing at times as to whether one should actually even accept invites like this. So it's a debate in your mind. Okay, now yes. Is it visible? Oh, great. Exactly. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. So in fact, during this extended pandemic, I keep debating in my mind as to whether one should accept an invite to address programs like this when people known to you across the country are going through very tough times. But I have on balance tried to reconcile myself that at least these 2-3 hours of learning sessions keep somebody disengaged from what's happening around and helps you to at least get that little bit of mind away from all this disturbance which is happening on. So let's all pray for quick, good times to come back. Of course, it's a little far away, but I guess with the discipline which all of us should practice, we should get back to normalcy sometime soon. So as far as the topic is concerned, amendments to Schedule 3, which the MCA notified on 24th March 2021. Before I start speaking on it, a small caveat. Whatever I speak now, it should be read with the text of the amendments. And more importantly, whatever I speak, none of it should be seen as views of the Accounting Standards Board or any of the other committees or of the council of the institute. Just for the benefit of all members, you are all aware that we have a guidance note on Schedule 3. Now that these amendments have come in, the guidance note will also be amended in due course. And there are many terms or many points in this set of amendments where a considered view has to be taken. So the view could eventually be what I am articulating now, or some edits might also happen based on the overall wisdom and insights which we will get. Sorry, PPT has again gone. Yeah. So let me set the context, and I have these 3 small messages, but this will be the underlying message in each of the amendments which MCA has now done. It's very important to understand the rationale of these amendments for us to comply with these amendments. I have always believed that the profession of accounting is all about accountability, raising your hands and saying that yes, I am answerable for what I am reporting or what I am expressing opinion on. And we all know that accounting is the base for taxation, governance, credit, investment, sustainability, and so on and so forth. And more importantly, considering that most of the people who are in the webinar now could be practicing chartered accountants, the opinion on financial statements is a communication. So when you give an audit report, when you give those the CARO attached to that audit report, that report is a communication. And just like in personal life, you and I expect communication to be truthful. In the case of audit reports, the same holds good as well. The Ministry of Corporate Affairs issued these amendments on 24th of March 21, where there have been amendments brought in all the 3 divisions. Division 1, which is applicable for those companies who follow the Companies Accounting Standard Rules 2006. Division 2 is for those who follow Ind AS, and Division 3 is for NBFCs who follow Ind AS. As far as the applicability goes, this revised Schedule 3 or the amendments will apply effective for the financial statements prepared for periods beginning on or after 1st April 2021. Why is the timing of this webinar important for this topic? In fact, many might think these amendments are applicable only for financial year 21-22. Probably we could invest time in learning this and applying this second half of the year or closer to the end of the financial year. Let me highlight to you, and I would make a sincere appeal to each of you. Please share this message across all the members that the amendments to Schedule 3 are so substantial that next year when you prepare the financial statements and you give comparative financial information for 31st March 21, all of this amendments related information has to be given for 31st March 2021 as well. And if we do not do a dry run now, while doing the preparation of financial statements for March 21 or the audit for the period ended March 21, there will be lots of surprise elements which the client or the preparer will be unhappy about at a later stage. I would strongly encourage that while the financial statements are prepared for March 21 itself, the implications of these amendments are highlighted to the boards of the companies concerned in a very formal manner so that people are all prepared on this and there is no surprise to them. And as I mentioned earlier, from the Institute, a guidance note on these amendments or Schedule 3 amendments will come sometime soon. This entire amendments to Schedule 3 got triggered by CARO 2020. As all of us are aware, CARO 2020 is substantially different from the earlier version of CARO 2016. And in CARO 2020, what MCA or the government seeks to achieve is to address this expectation gap. All of us speak in every forum possible that there is an expectation gap. We do something, whereas the stakeholders and regulators have a different expectation. CARO 2020 and now the amendments in Schedule 3 is a step in the direction to reduce the expectation. So instead of MCA or government imagining that these things are all in order, now they are asking for a specific assertion of the same. So the moment you assert the same, you are reducing that expectation gap. And my experience of interaction with MCA, while many of us might find the additional reporting requirements, either as a preparer or as an auditor, a little burdensome, let me share with you that MCA has a huge respect for the chartered accountancy fraternity. And they strongly believe that if there is one set of professionals who can actually help them in enhancing governance and in identifying red flags earlier, it's only the chartered accountants. They have that very clear understanding and respect for the accounting profession. And I have pasted below the Ministry of Corporate Affairs tagline. Look at this tagline. Many of you might have seen it, but I thought I should use this opportunity as well to highlight to you what is the theme under which they are working on a daily basis. And every circular, every notification, every amendment, you can actually see this. MCA's tagline talks about empowering business and protecting investors. Mind you, this is the tagline of MCA. And they talk about achieving all of this, being a regulator, an integrator, a facilitator, and an educator as well. I'll spend a few minutes on CARO 2020 because almost all of these Schedule 3 amendments are driven by CARO 2020. So what are the changes and why these changes? As far as CARO 2020 is concerned, compared to its earlier form of 2016, which all of us will report for financial year ending 2021 as well, 7 clauses out of that are retained as is. Another 7 clauses are retained with changes. 1 clause on managerial remuneration is getting deleted. 5 new clauses have been introduced, and there were 2 clauses in the earlier CARO of 2003 which were deleted when 2016 CARO was issued. 2 clauses have been brought in back, and effectively we have 21 clauses, and with sub-clauses we have 47 sub-clauses effectively to report. It's huge, and let me share with you, compared to the project they originally started off, this is a pruned down list of 47, and based on experience of how the governance improvement is happening, this list might either increase or decrease. If you want the risk to reduce, the governance has to improve overall. If the governance is appearing shaky, the list will only become much bigger in times to come. And all of this in the interest of less government and more governance. So the idea here is, instead of MCA individually going after each of the companies, doing their inquiries and investigation, you make this part of the reporting process itself, where preparers report some part of the information and auditors give an assertion of the same. So the idea is the MCA deals only with exceptions, and if everything is right based on the assertion of auditor, life moves on. And as I mentioned at the start, more trust on the auditors by the government for better governance. And friends, most importantly, it is a very, very powerful tool in the hands of auditors to express an opinion. So more often than not, we all come across situations where the main audit report has its limitations in terms of how much you can describe about what's happening in the company. Thankfully, we have SA 701 now, Key Audit Matters. I'm a huge fan of SA 701 to such an extent that I encourage unlisted companies and private limited companies, also those auditors, to voluntarily apply SA 701. It brings life to the audit report. It brings life to audit report as to what are those key audit matters, why those matters were considered as key, how did you go about satisfying yourself, and what is the satisfaction you've got. So similar to that, you have this CARO 2020, which is also fairly descriptive in nature, where you give your comments on several matters. So as I mentioned, 7 new clauses have been added. Just look at the left hand side, the 7 new clauses, and you'll find that the Schedule 3 amendments, all of these amendments have been done keeping practicing chartered accountants in mind. Keeping practicing chartered accountants in mind. For an auditor to report on a transaction which is not recorded in books, it is not possible if the preparer is not having a responsibility for the same. For the auditor to come to a view on whether the company will be solvent, unless there is enough indicators prepared by the management and management gives those indicators, it is not possible for the auditors to make that kind of a opinion. So this entire Schedule 3 amendments which are there is largely in the backdrop of the CARO 2020, the clauses which are there in CARO 2020 to help the auditors to express an opinion. The preparers have been asked to make available that information as part of the financial statements. And while revising Schedule 3 for this purpose, there were a few areas where some edits were pending and those edits have been done. For example, Ind AS 116, lease liability, where to present it, the earlier Schedule 3, Division 2 did not have a specific line item. Ind AS 116 came in only last year, 2019. So this was an opportunity to introduce that line item. So a few more incidental changes which are considered critical have been brought in as part of Schedule 3. But the trigger for these amendments is only CARO 2020 and to assist the auditors in expressing their opinion in CARO, which will be possible if the preparers are reporting the same. So you have to see this entire CARO 2020 amendments to Schedule 3 in this backdrop. Over the slides, as I walk you through the slides, wherever possible, I have reproduced that paragraph of CARO 2020 as well to explain that this amendment in Schedule 3, requirement of preparer to report, is because of this particular paragraph. Wherever possible, I have done the same. Now, coming to amendments in Schedule 3 of Companies Act, a quick summary of 2-3 minutes. All of these amendments, approximately about 31 amendments are there. They broadly fall under 4 headers. These are not headers in Schedule 3. These are not headers in Schedule 3 or CARO. These are headers for our understanding. There are some amendments which have been done to increase the level of disclosures so that as a regulator, I can have more oversight on the governance, the quality of governance which is there on various aspects. For example, what is the extent of promoter shareholding? What is the shareholding change? In respect of charges, which when companies have borrowed money, whether those charges have been created on time, satisfied on time. If there are amalgamations happening or business combinations happening, whether the scheme of arrangement, the various terms of the scheme of arrangement have been complied with. So similar such requirements have been added as disclosures in amended Schedule 3. One of those important ones is this working capital reconciliation, and I would encourage and request that this one single item, please socialize with every single client of yours formally, communicate it formally, because else tomorrow there will be a client dissatisfaction, and also request your peers to do the same. I'm sure all of you, based on your experience, will recollect or rather be able to appreciate that when it comes to the working capital borrowings from banking system, we have a requirement of filing stock statements with the bank. It can be a physical stock, it can be receivables. What CARO 2020 requires is, if your working capital limits are above 5 crores, fund plus non-fund put together, then you are required to make an opinion as to whether the stock statement filed with the banks is tallying with the books of account. So you answer for yourself based on your experience. During the year on 30th June, 30th September, for unlisted companies, private limited companies, where we do not close the books formally. We do not close the books formally, whether what is filed with the banks and what is there in the books of account will tally 1-to-1 or not. If it doesn't tally, you are required to disclose a reconciliation as to why the differences is there. Not an easy one, not an easy one, extremely tough. I would strongly advise every client formally sensitize them that this is a requirement which is there now in Caro 2020. And also as the preparer also, Schedule 3 requires the management also to give that. Then second is a set of changes for improving the financial discipline and also for getting an idea of the solvency of an organization. So preparers are required to publish about 11 ratios they are required to publish. Aging of trade receivables and trade payables have been brought in. There are some finer points which are there, which I'll highlight few minutes from now. Aging of capital work in progress has any reasonable sized company on an ongoing basis some capital work in progress. So you take up some expansion projects which can complete in 18 months, 24 months, 36 months. So aging of those projects, never heard of earlier. And mind you, some of these disclosures, you don't have it in any part of the globe, any part of the globe. And if these capital work in progress projects, there is either a time overrun or a cost overrun, then there is a separate disclosure to be done of the fact of time overrun, cost overrun. So all of this require lots of documentation, lots of thinking by the board at the time when the projects are approved or submitted to bank for raising debt. So you can't have a particular time schedule for approaching the banks, a particular time schedule for your board approval process. So all of those have to be balanced. All of those have to be balanced. So that's another important disclosure. Preparers are required to give. Preparers are required to give. It will be quite challenging. Transactions not recorded in books, basically undisclosed income, if any, which comes in the process of income tax assessment, and around CSR spend. The third category of amendments in Schedule 3 are to give early signals in respect of money laundering. All of us are experiencing around in the ecosystem. There are reasonably good number of entities, maybe 5% of entities, 7% of entities. I don't have a statistic, but the reasonably good number of entities of different sizes, large, medium, small, where there are irregularities. And most often than not, these irregularities don't get detected because we don't have those red flags which are raised well in advance. So the amendments to Schedule 3 requires the company preparer to state dealings with companies whose names have been struck off. So if there are transactions of purchase, sale, lending, etc., where a company's name has been struck off, but you are showing a transaction is there, you need to disclose. Disclosures of Binami transactions, if there is some suit filed on the company for that. Cases where immobile properties are not held in company's name. Cases where entities have been declared as a willful defaulter. And there are many cases where companies borrow in their name and onward lend it to subsidiaries, joint ventures, associates, or special purpose vehicles. So some cases, like a company like L&T, there are hundreds of SPVs where money is raised at the parent level, push it down for each project to be executed. But there are other cases where monies get routed down. So those instances you are required to report where loans have been given, loans have been taken, end use of borrowed funds. So this is also a requirement in Caro, for which there is a requirement for the preparer to tell that yes, we borrowed money for this purpose and we have used it only for that purpose. No, we used it for some other purpose, then you disclose the fact. So the preparer also has the responsibility of disclosing those loans, advances given to the related parties like promoters, directors, and the relatives, dealings in cryptocurrencies and crypto assets as well. And lastly, fourth category of changes, there are minor changes and edits which have been done since the Schedule 3 was, any case, getting amended. But let me share with you, there's a much larger project we have to take up for amending Schedule 3 because there is so much of inconsistent information. And happy to share with you that at the request of the institute, the government has moved some of the information to a category called additional regulatory information. So the idea is to make the financial statements carry information more related to explaining the financial statements. If the idea of government is to get information in addition to what is related to financial statements, then better to capture it in a different category. So a small beginning has been made where you have this header called Y, the header called Y, under which additional regulatory information has been captured. So hopefully that's a good beginning where eventually some of this information, which is largely meant for governance purpose, regulatory purpose, and not necessarily for understanding financial statements, will all eventually move to that category of additional regulatory information. For example, our financial statements, eventually as the fifth or sixth largest GDP in the world, should be comparable with the financial statements across the world. So if you have trade payables, MSME, etc., you don't have all this breakup in other parts of the world. This MSME, etc., is a breakup which you wanted internally within our country for regulating discipline around MSME payments. But that has nothing to do with understanding the financial statements. So there are lots of such information which is there, which gradually we have to start moving it to that category called additional regulatory information. So made a small beginning. Hopefully over time, some shift should happen, and the financial statement should look clean, and the notes to account should carry explanations to what is there in the financial statements and as required by various accounting standards or Ind AS. And our financial statements should look comparable with the financial statements across the world. You should not have additional information which you are capturing only for your internal regulatory purpose, which hopefully over time will get captured under the heading called additional regulatory information. So some minor changes or edits have been done, like rounding off the numbers. Instead of turnover, we have now taken total income, and a small conceptual correction. Income, we had the total called total revenue, whereas income is the more appropriate terminology. So total income has come. So similar kind of changes have been done. All of these are minor edits. So let me begin with the amendments which are applicable for Division 1 entities, almost all of which are applicable for Division 2 and Division 3 entities as well. Some of these are less important, so I will move a little faster on this and spend time more on the Schedule 3 amendments which are driven by CARO. So first is this applicability of rounding off. So earlier the rounding off was done based on the reference to turnover. Now instead of turnover, you have to calculate with reference to your total income. So if your total income is less than 100 crores, you can round it off to hundreds, thousand, lakhs, millions or decimals thereof. If it is 100 crores or more, then to the nearest lakhs, millions or crores or decimals thereof. The difference between turnover and income, as far as turnover is concerned, it basically comes from your principal activity of selling goods, services. whereas income, total income is the total income which you see in your P&L income statement, which has revenue, that is from sale of goods, services, plus other income as well, including gains and things like that. Together, total income. So henceforth, the rounding of criteria has to be applied with reference to total income instead of turnover. Second is the disclosure requirement for governance on promoter shareholding. We currently have a disclosure requirement of shareholders holding more than 5%, which more or less covers promoters as well. But the idea is to specifically identify the promoter shareholding and changes in the promoter shareholding during the period, either an increase or a decrease during the period. For listed companies, we already have this requirement as part of the LODR requirements. Now, this requirement has been brought in for all companies as well. So I don't think companies should have any hesitation in making this disclosure. The term promoter is defined in the Companies Act and the same expression shall be used. Now comes this important amendment relating to aging. First is aging schedule of trade payables. And I would like to caution everyone here two important things. First and foremost is all of you are aware that we have this rules relating to acceptance of deposits, and if there is any payable more than 1 year, it is treated as a deposit. So if there are trade payables where your aging is exceeding a year, there is a possibility that an inquiry will be commenced as to whether it is a public deposit and whether there is violation of those rules as well. That's one very important caution. Second is this aging schedule of trade payables, you need to give it as trade payables for MSME and others, and you also need to give how much of this trade payables to MSME are disputed trade payables, and for others how much is disputed. So what constitutes dispute and at what level do you call as dispute? I would leave it that we should wait for the institute guidance note to come for us to form a view on that. A simple, my view, a simple mail or a letter saying that I don't accept this will not make it a disputed due. It has to be something more substantive. So at what extent it would be considered as substantive, we should wait for that. But this disclosure of disputed dues is important because tomorrow, if the other party wants to file a suit, and you are showing it as accepted dues, which means you cannot avoid the liability at all. So if you are showing it as disputed dues, there should be a strong rationale of why you are showing as disputed dues. Similarly, in insolvency proceedings and all, to establish the dues, this classification again will become important. There are two other points which we need to take care here. One is this disclosure is for trade payables which are due for payment. So if there are total trade payables of let's say 50 crores and the credit period has not yet expired for 30 crores, there is still credit period. Credit period is 90 days and 30 crores you have not completed the credit period. Then this breakup needs to be given only for the balance 20 crores. Second point, there would be many cases where there would be payables without a specific credit period. So those cases, they'll be treated as due immediately. So if there is no specific credit period, they will be treated as due immediately and they would come as part of the aging schedule. And any unbilled dues should be shown separately. As far as trade receivables are concerned, similar disclosure requirements, and I would strongly urge that when you are presenting to audit committee for the financial year 2021, while you may not disclose this in financial statements, it's important to bring it to their attention that next year when they prepare annual reports, previous year comparative figure, this information would be given. So 31st March 21, this breakup is still relevant. You are not going to report now, but you are going to report it next year. And it's important the audit committee and board members are sensitized on this. Once this kind of an aging is available, look at how the banks would start assessing working capital limits, etc., etc. So you are required to give your receivables broken up as undisputed, which are considered good, undisputed considered doubtful, disputed considered good, and disputed which are considered as doubtful. And for those receivables where the due date is not mentioned or the credit period is not mentioned, the credit period will start or the due date will start from the date of the transaction itself, and any unbilled revenue should be shown separately. Next is the disclosure requirements relating to property, plant, equipment, and intangible assets. This is the paragraph on fixed assets in Caro 2020. This is a new paragraph which has been added. Whether the company has revalued its assets, whether it is valued by a registered valuer, and if the change is more than 10%, then you are required to make a disclosure. Now, for Ind AS entities, a choice of cost model versus revaluation model. So you need to ascertain. There could be some cases where people are doing transition for the first time. So those cases they may choose to do a revaluation. Ind AS 101, they might elect that particular choice. Now, relating to this clause in Caro, we have the Schedule 3 amendment. There's an editorial change. There's an editorial change where earlier Schedule 3 used the expression called tangible assets. Now it is revised as property, plant, and equipment. And the other change is with reference to revaluation. If the revaluation has an impact of more than 10% for each class of asset, you need to make a separate disclosure of the same. So earlier we used to have a disclosure requirement of additions, disposals and all. Now you have a separate disclosure requirement for the revaluation impact as well. It could be an increase or a decrease. Presentation alignments. One is in the context of current maturities of long-term borrowings. As far as current maturity of long-term borrowings are concerned, the Schedule 6 currently required disclosure under other current liabilities, whereas now the amendment has been done to show it separately as part of short-term borrowings. In the case of security deposits on the asset side, it was earlier shown as part of long-term loans and advances. Now it will be shown as part of other non-current assets, which is a more appropriate presentation. Additional regulatory information, again in the context of property, plant, equipment and intangible assets. This is the clause in Caro on fixed assets. I'll highlight the two new clauses and please recall what I mentioned earlier. The Schedule 3 amendment has been done largely to help the auditors to express an opinion. Auditors will be in a position to express an opinion only if preparers are making available that information as part of financial statements. And it is in this context that these amendments have been done. One, whether the company is maintaining proper records showing full particulars of intangible assets. And second, where title deeds of all immovable property, if it is not in the name of the company, the auditor has to report in a particular format. To facilitate that, Schedule 3 has been amended as part of additional regulatory information, this table needs to be given. This table needs to be given. Wherever title deeds are not in the company's name, you are required to give what is that particular item and in whose name it is there. And in practice, my own experience, there are many cases where land has been allotted, land has been purchased, but registration in our name is not there. So on the land, construction activity is also happened, but the title deed is still not in your name. So all of these will come here and suitable disclosures need to be made for the same. Similarly, there is disclosure requirement of whether the revaluation has been done by a registered valuer. You need to make a disclosure. This again comes out of CARO requirement, and where loans and advances are given to promoters, directors, key management personnel and related parties, you are required to make a disclosure of how much is the loans which are repayable on demand and what are the amount of loans which have been given without specifying the terms of period of repayment. And they have mentioned a particular format in which how this breakup needs to be given: promoters, directors, key management personnel, relatives, and percentage of loans to total advances. The precaution here is there are some disclosures you would any case do as part of AS 18 or Ind AS 23. Related party, those disclosures will be there, but those disclosures are relatives as per the accounting standards. Here relatives is as per the Companies Act. So the two may not necessarily match, but it is very important as a preparer and as an auditor that you should carry a reconciliation, because sometime you might be asked to explain why there's a difference between the disclosure there and disclosure here. Then capital work in progress. I have briefly mentioned this at the start. For all the capital work in progress which you are having, you are required to make a disclosure of what is the estimated time of completion. You expect it to complete less than a year, 1 to 2 years, 2 to 3 years, more than 3 years. What is the estimated time of completion of each of these assets? And on capital work in progress, there is also a disclosure requirement. If there is a time overrun or a cost overrun, project wise, you are required to make a disclosure of it was supposed to be completed within this period, could not be completed, and hence this is the position. So what is the original timeline? What is the revised timeline? What is the original estimated cost? What is the revised estimated cost? And if any of the projects has been suspended, like the pandemic period, so details of the suspension has to be given. Similar disclosures are to be given for intangible assets under development as well. So capital work in progress for tangible assets. Similarly for intangible assets also, the aging schedule of expected time of completing it. And similarly, if there is an overrun, again details need to be given project wise as to how much is the overrun. Then disclosure relating to Benami transactions. We have this clause in CARO, which says whether any proceedings have been initiated or are pending against the company under the Benami Transactions Act of 1988. So for the auditors to express an opinion on this, the preparers have to give in the financial statements as part of additional regulatory information any property. If there are any suits which have been filed against the company for Benami transactions, they have to give details of such property, who are the beneficiaries, which item in the balance sheet this is included, if it is not in the books, for what reason it's not in the books, and the status of the proceedings under the Benami Act and the company's views on the same. And let me share with you all of this. There is substantial guidance which is required, because when something is sub judice, whether a company would like to disclose its legal strategy or its company's views on the same, so to what extent, all those are matters of question, which when the guidance note gets finalized, we should get clarity on the same. On working capital, we have this clause in CARO which has been inserted now, almost a suicidal clause for many entities. And I'm sharing this out of experience, and I have no hesitation in calling this as a suicidal clause for many entities. For most of the unlisted companies and private limited companies, it will be extremely challenging unless they develop a discipline of quarterly closure of financial statements. It will be very difficult to tie up between what is submitted to the bank and what is there in the financial statements or in the books of account. So if your working capital limits, and mind you, it is including non-fund based limits, if it exceeds 5 crores, which means almost every operating company will get covered here. And for those companies, you have this disclosure requirement. So in Schedule 3, the management, the preparer, has to give their assertion as part of additional regulatory information, whether quarterly statements have been filed and whether they are tallying with the books of account. If not, summary of reconciliation and reasons of material discrepancies. Pardon me for reiterating again, but I would strongly advocate formally communicate to all your clients in writing about this particular clause and ask them to be prepared while calculating all of these stock statement purpose 30th June, 30th September, and to get it properly reviewed. Larger companies, I'm less worried. Larger companies have a fair amount of control and people working. So most of the large companies will not struggle, but smaller companies certainly will have a challenge in terms of ensuring this reconciliation. Then comes the requirements relating to willful default and end use of funds. This again comes from the CARO clause. In CARO 2020, new clauses have been added, whether the company is a willful defaulter and whether they have been classified as such by any bank or financial institution or other lender. CARO 2020 also has a clause, term loans, whether they were applied for the purpose for which they were not obtained. If not, the amount of loans which have been diverted. This was a clause which was there in 2003 CARO. It was removed in 2016. It has been reintroduced now. Whether funds raised on short-term basis have been utilized for long-term purposes. So whether there is any diversion of money here. This clause also was in 2003 CARO. It was withdrawn in 2016 and is brought back. So as regards willful defaulter, in Schedule 3 amended, the company is required to make a disclosure as to what is the date on which they have been declared as a willful defaulter and the details of the default. And regarding the borrowings from banks and financial institutions, they are required to make a disclosure of whether the amounts have been used for the purpose for which the monies have been raised. If not, disclose the same. Next is requirements relating to solvency of an organization. This is the paragraph in CARO where auditors are required to make a judgment, express an opinion on capability of a company meeting its liabilities. We have seen rating agencies who have very sophisticated models and full-time professionals working on it, failing on these judgments. They use very sophisticated models and lots of ratios and all. And we know cases where companies have been rated AA and above, also going into default within a short term without downgrades happening. Auditors are now required to make a comment in the CARO on the basis of financial ratios, aging and expected dates of realization of financial assets and payment of financial liabilities. Auditors are required to make a comment. Since auditors might calculate ratios in a particular way, management might calculate in a particular way, responsibility has been put on the management also to report a few ratios as part of financial statements. And on this clause, I would strongly advocate that the audit working paper should be very tight to form an opinion on this. It's not an easy judgment. I've been in the financial services industry for a long time. I have come across cases, I'm sure all of you as well, companies have been AAA rated by established rating agencies going bankrupt within a quarter. So in that environment, as an auditor, the ability to comment on the solvencies of the organization and all is something we have to be extremely careful. The working papers should be so tight that tomorrow you should be in a position to justify that I have done what I could. I have done what I could, and there is no delivery gap from my end. There can be extraneous reasons. It's always possible. Like, for example, I always give this example. Audit opinion is like a master health checkup. I can have a master health checkup in the best of the hospitals, Apollo, and the health checkup can tell that I am healthy. Does not mean the next day morning I should not collapse. I can still collapse. The health checkup is based on certain conditions and a process followed, based on a process followed. So we follow the audit standards prepared as per accounting standards. Based on that, you're given an opinion. But if you do an investigation, then something else could be detected. So like that. So here, tight working papers are extremely important for the auditors. So preparers are required to give these 11 ratios, current ratio, debt equity ratio, so on and so forth. And for each of these ratios, the numerator and denominator needs to be explained. You need to tell, this is how I've taken the numerator, this is how I've taken the denominator. Of course, the guidance note when we prepare will address some of these. And internationally also, IASB is looking at a project, and it's sort of led by our own Dr. Zaveri, who was the former ASB chairman, who is now chairman of AOSSG. He is also piloting this project of developing ratios to be disclosed as part of financial statements. Currently, we have one ratio called EPS, earnings per share. So similarly, other ratios also, it is very nascent stages there. But in India, we have moved ahead with the requirement of giving these 11 ratios to be given. And if there is a variance of 25% between last year to now, then you need to explain the same. And please note, all these ratios you will give for current year, previous year. So for financial year 21-22, you will do it for that period and previous year period, and then 25%. So people need to, that is why I keep repeating that when you do financial statements of 2021 itself, you need to be prepared and caution all the audit committee and board members on the same. Intercompany loans, we have the clause in CARO, a clause relating to default and repayment of dues. Whether the company has taken any funds for meeting the obligations of its subsidiaries, joint ventures, associates, and whether the company has raised loans by pledging the securities which are held in subsidiaries, joint ventures, subsidiaries, associates, etc. And in this context, we have this requirement in Schedule 3. Please note, and at the cost of repetition, almost all of the Schedule 3 amendments now are because of CARO requirements. So here again, in this disclosure requirement in the financial statements, the company preparer are required to give a disclosure regarding loans given. If I am giving a loan which will be meant for giving it onward to somebody, I should make a disclosure of what are those type of loans which are given for onward lending. Similarly, on loans taken, if I have received a loan for giving it onward, I need to make a disclosure of the same and also make a declaration that I've complied with the provisions of FEMA where applicable, Companies Act where applicable, the various limits which are there, and that I have not violated the Prevention of Money Laundering Act, which means every preparer and the auditor, every preparer and auditor should have complete knowledge of FEMA. Most occasions I find auditors relying on others for views on FEMA and PMLA. Those days are gone. It is very important as chartered accountant to have a good understanding of the FEMA provisions and PMLA. While we may rely on subject matter experts to understand what they are inferring, also we need to have a basic knowledge. So in that context, it becomes all the more important because you have this specific assertion that you have this compliance with FEMA and PMLA as well. Other Companies Act requirements, relationship with struck off companies. So some companies have been struck off under section 248 of Companies Act 2013 or the erstwhile 560 of the Companies Act. If there are investment in securities, if there are receivables, payables, or any other outstanding balances, or if that defunct company is holding shares in you, if the defunct company is holding shares in you, then those details needs to be given. So these details are again not so easy to obtain, particularly shares held by defunct company. So if there are several shareholders widely held, then identifying list of shareholders and then seeing whether it is stuck off, that itself is a work. It's a substantial amount of work. I believe the guidance note when we develop should give some clarity on how to approach the same. Registration of charges or satisfaction of charges. If they are not done within the time limit, you are required to make a disclosure of the same along with reasons as to why you could not complete it within the original time limit. There is a requirement in the Companies Act section 287 that you cannot have more than 2 layers of subsidiaries. So in case you have more than 2 layers of subsidiaries, you are required to make a disclosure of the same. Then another disclosure requirement is regarding schemes of arrangement, mergers and amalgamations. You are required to give a assertion, the preparer, the management has to give an assertion that we have given effect to the scheme of arrangement in the book. Accounting has been done as per the accounting standards, and if there is any deviation, explanation needs to be given for the same. This is a minor edit, is an important edit. In the P&L, earlier operating revenue and other income, it was called as total revenue. Total revenue is not a correct expression, so it's now changed as total income. Similarly, one more small change has been done. For section 8 companies, their important receipt for them is grants or donations which are received. So those grants or donations received will be shown as part of operating income. So that's a new line item which has been added. This is the clause in CARO on unrecorded income. So in the context of tax assessments, so if there is some unrecorded income which is getting disclosed, in CARO, auditors are required to make a comment. Now, in the Schedule 3 amendment, the preparers are required to make a disclosure of the details of transactions not recorded in books, amount of income which you have offered, which you have surrendered for being taxed. If there is an immunity given in the scheme, then you need not disclose it. Otherwise, you need to disclose the same along with where it was earlier accounted. You disclosed it by showing it as a liability. For example, I showed it as a liability instead of showing it as income. So those kind of disclosures you need to make. And on CSR, we have a clause in CARO. This is a new clause where the auditors are required to give a comment on whether the section 135 provisions of transferring unspent amount for ongoing projects, others are transferred within 6 months, 1 month respectively. So to facilitate auditors to make that opinion, we have a requirement in the Schedule 3 amendments where a company is required to share what is the minimum amount to be spent, how much we have spent, how much not spent, how much ongoing project, how much not ongoing project. whether you have complied with relevant accounting standard, all those disclosure requirements are there. And on cryptocurrency, I saw a comment in the chat box in Sylvia's presentation. In India, of course, it's not legal, it is not allowed, but there can be instance of consolidated financial statements. So there's an Indian company having a subsidiary or joint ventures, subsidiary rather, in other jurisdictions where virtual currencies are allowed. So when you consolidate, so that entity will have a cryptocurrency which will come in your consolidated balance sheet and consolidated income statement. So those have to be reported. So if there is some if there is any profit or loss on cryptocurrency, an amount of currency, you have to make a disclosure here. So I expect legally this should be applicable only for those organizations where there is consolidated. If it comes in standalone, as someone mentioned in the chat box, as it stands today, it is prohibited. And incremental amendments in the context of division to entities, companies following Ind AS. So as I mentioned, Ind AS 116 was issued in 2019. It became effective then. So disclosure of lease liabilities, we did not have a separate line item. So that lease liabilities line item has now been added. And in this SOCI, statement of changes in equity, new columns have been added where if there are changes in share capital because of prior period errors, so that amount needs to be shown separately, and revised opening balance also struck in line with IAS 8. And for trade receivables aging schedule, in Ind AS, as Sylvia was also showing, we have the concept of significant increase in credit risk and impaired and all. So those you need to make a disclosure separately, but those would apply largely for loans and advances, because for trade receivables, we follow what is called the simplified approach. And for NBFCs following the Ind AS requirements, there's one additional requirement, which is regarding a few ratios to be disclosed. These are ratios currently, they disclose it to the central bank, Reserve Bank. Now they have to be made as part of financial statements. So Tier 1 capital adequacy, Tier 2 capital adequacy, and the liquidity coverage ratio. So with this, I've tried my best within the time available. Maybe I've overshot by about 5-6 minutes to introduce the amendments to Schedule 3. Happy to interact with you. And before I commence interacting with you on the chat box, I'd just like to conclude borrowing again a quote from this great gentleman of whom I'm a big fan. He talks about technical excellence in performance of work and observance of highest in professional ethics constitutes the foundation on which the future of the profession can be built. And Mark, these are words way back in 1949, and they're so true even today. So thank you.